I want to do a quick video of some of the stuff that I learned swapping this Gen 1 small block into my RX7 that I wish I knew early, and I'm sure other people who are swapping small blocks into other vehicles they don't belong into probably might find some of this information useful, especially when it comes just into the fitment and some of the stuff that's available to help make the swap easier. So I first put this motor in, the kit was from Granny's Racing, and this was already done in this roller in the first place before I bought it. A lot of that work was done, and when I put the motor in, it leaked oil everywhere. The oil pan was resting on the steering rack, which I'll show you in the video, and the oil pan just leaked massively. So when I finally decided that it was time to pull the motor and change the oil pan and get a new cam, get it all fixed, I was pretty pumped. And the first thing that happened was a loud, horrible smacking noise coming from the motor. And I'd already tested the oil pan at the machine shop, already tested it on the engine stand, and it was pretty disappointing to have to pull the motor. So if this video can help anybody so they don't have to pull their motor twice over the same kind of issue, that would be pretty cool. And part of the instructions were modifying the oil pan so that they would clear both the steering rack and the connecting rods. So if you look at the instructions here, they're talking about using a steel pipe and a hammer to just kind of create the space that you need from the steering rack. They just want you to measure it, and they want you to literally just hit it. But the problem is that the face of the front main oil seal, that starts to pull back naturally as you make that modification to the oil pan. And you can see two different oil pans, both for a small block Chevy, where once it's struck, where the arrows indicate that the front starts pulling up, is it should be touching the other one or have an equal gap. It does not. So this is what the kit looks like when it's installed in the car in the engine bay. You can see where the rear of the car is. Here's a steering rack. When it goes on, the oil pan sits right there and ends kind of just right where the sway bar is. So when I got it in, not only did the oil pan still touch the steering rack, the oil pan leaked because of the modification to the oil pan. So it's not very ideal. I tried to fix it by using these braces. They just hypothetically help pull the oil pan up. It doesn't do anything though. It didn't do anything for me anyway. So pull the whole engine out. The engine needed to be pulled out because it had some leak by the oil rings on the piston, and I wanted to get a new cam for it as well. So pulled the engine out, started looking for a new oil pan. I wanted a Canton's website, talked to tech support, and we kind of figured out that the best oil pan would be the Canton 15244. So this is the most shallow oil pan that I could find for a small block for anybody's swap. I'm assuming this would be the most useful. So it's a nice pan. It's got, all the baffles and windage trays that you would want. It's got a couple drain plugs and fill plugs. So the second thing that I was thinking that might help is getting new engine mounts that are less likely to compress over time and allow it to sag in the engine to get closer to the steering rack. So we got these energy suspension mounts and these Dirty Dingo adjustable mounts that go between the engine mount and the block. And what those do is allow about 3 inches total of ability to slide the engine back and forth. It also raises the engine up 7/16 of an inch. And this could probably be pretty useful for anybody who has a small block swap in something that shouldn't belong. But I'll get to it later in the video to show you, but it wouldn't have been possible to install these if I had not gotten a Hyperspark ignition, because a normal Pro billet distributor with the vacuum advance would have hit the firewall because of the new mounts raising the engine up just so slightly. So you can see the Dirty Dingo mount on the block, and then the energy suspension motor mount attached to the Dirty Dingo mount. And everything is just getting ready. Put the oil pan on. The oil pan, when the machine shop had the block, they already checked it, the crank, for any contact with the oil pan. Without a gasket on, there was none. I decided to do it myself anyway, and there also was none. So I had the oil pan on, just put, 4 of the bolts on. Maybe that was the mistake, but nothing occurred. So I get it all ready. It's about to be put into the car, get it in. I start checking for that clearance, and there's a lot more space. Before, it was riding on it. Now, plenty of space. So that's no longer an issue. Also, when checking the oil pan, I had to make sure that it would fit the exhaust. That exhaust did not have to get changed because of the oil pan. That was actually because it hit a rock, and I just wanted that piece fixed. It was dented in. But also, it's definitely a consideration when changing oil pan. It's certainly much closer to the exhaust than it was before. So now the oil pan, or the engine, has to come back out because the oil pan was hitting the connecting rods, as you could hear in the video, and man, was that infuriating. It took a lot of effort to get that motor and transmission in because my working space is so small, but took the motor back out and checked the oil pan, and you can see right here 3 contact marks. The uppermost mark that you're looking at is really hard to see in the photo, and it had less wear on it than the first 2, but it was also there. You can see each of these wear marks. That's enough to make an incredibly loud noise when the motor is running, even that tiny bit right there. So I just masked it off, cut it off with a little tiny Dremel, and here are the pieces. Here's just a little bit of wear on each one, ever so slightly, that caused me a lot of heartache. So after that, just washed it out, a little parts cleaner, and then rechecked the connecting rods and just kind of saw where maybe they were hitting, and everything was good. So re-put on an oil pan, another oil pan gasket, this time using studs to put the oil pan on instead of bolts, because it was very, very difficult to get the oil pan bolts lined up. Pretty hard to get the oil pan on with the pickup tube anyway. So get everything on, recheck for noises, still didn't hear any. So one last check, get everything tightened down. And getting the motor back in, it's funny because the first time I got the motor in, I got the bolts in with a nut on, and the second time I couldn't get a fastener started. And if you look at the instructions, it does warn you that the bolt size that you need might not be the bolt size that comes with the mounts, and it wasn't. I needed a much longer bolt. So after that, it wasn't a big deal. You can see here how much you're able to slide and adjust the mount because of the Dirty Dingo system, which is very helpful in getting everything just kind of lined up before you tighten down the sliding mount. You can see how little room there is between the distributor and the firewall, and if you had a normal Pro Billet distributor on there with a vacuum advance, it just would not fit, and you wouldn't be able to retard or advance the ignition the way that you normally would, because there'd be no room to move it, as opposed to the Hyperspark that it's all done by the ECU anyway. You don't actually move the distributor at all to change the ignition. And that really became even more of an issue once the Dirty Dingo mounts raised the engine up and got it closer to the firewall.